You're shaking, Ross. Maybe trauma isn't your speed, or maybe you just don't have the stomach for the red stuff. Dr. Simmons sneered, his voice dripping with exhausted condescension as he stripped off his latex gloves. Jenna Ross dropped the curved hemostat. It hit the linoleum with a sharp, accusatory clatter. "I'm sorry, Doctor," she whispered, her voice trembling, gaze fixed firmly on her scuffed white sneakers. She shrank back, shoulders hunched inward, making herself smaller, invisible, a creature of prey in a room of predators. A pitiful display of incompetence, the perfect camouflage. No one looks twice at the weak link. No one suspects that the trembling rookie, hyperventilating in the corner, is actually a dormant predator waiting for the tripwire to snap. She adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses, masking the cold, predatory calculation in her eyes. The emergency room at St. Jude's Medical Center hummed with a low-frequency chaotic energy, a specific kind of discord that usually preceded a storm. It was 0200 hours, the witching hour, where the drunks faded out and the real violence bled in from the city streets. Jenna Ross stood near the nurse's station, clutching a clipboard to her chest like a shield. She watched the telemetry monitors, not with the anxiety she feigned, but with a rhythmic analysis of the room's pulse. To the casual observer, and to her colleagues, specifically Lauren Cooper, Jenna was the charity hire, the quiet transfer from a rural clinic who jumped at shadows and fumbled with IV lines. "Relax, Jen," Lauren said, popping a piece of gum. She leaned against the high counter, scrolling through her phone. "It's a GSW to the leg, not a thoracotomy. You don't need to hyperventilate." I hate the screaming," Jenna mumbled, tucking a loose strand of brown hair behind her ear. "It's a hospital. People scream. Dr. Simmons is on point tonight anyway. He'll do the work. You just hand him the gauze and try not to faint." The bay doors hissed open. The sensory assault was immediate. Red strobes from the ambulance bay cut through the fluorescent sterility of the ER. 2 paramedics wheeled a gurney in at a run, the wheels screeching on the polished floor. "Male mid-30s, single gunshot wound to the left thigh," the lead paramedic shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "BP 90/60, tachycardia at 120. Bleeding is controlled with a tourniquet, applied 10 minutes ago." Dr. Mark Simmons strode forward, the king of his little kingdom. "Bay 2, let's move. Ross, get the trauma shears. Try not to cut the patient this time." Jenna nodded frantically, scurrying after the gurney. But as she moved, her eyes didn't widen in fear. They narrowed in assessment. She looked at the patient. White male. High-end suit, ruined by blood and grime. Rolex Submariner on the left wrist. Genuine, not a Canal Street knockoff. No wallet visible. But it was the eyes that told the story. The patient, identified on the intake form only as John Doe, wasn't in shock from blood loss. He was scanning the exits. Target analysis, high value. Fear response, hunted. Origin, professional hit. "Get him over," Simmons barked. They transferred the man to the hospital bed on the count of 3. The man groaned, his hand lashing out to grab Simmons' scrub top. "Don't let them in," the man rasped. His accent was Eastern European, maybe Albanian. "They are behind me." "You're delirious, pal. Lay back," Simmons said, peeling the man's fingers off. "Ross, cut the pant leg. Watch the tourniquet." Jenna stepped forward. She took the shears. Her hands shook visibly as she approached the bloody fabric. "Steady, Ross," Lauren warned from the other side of the bed. Jenna cut the fabric. The wound was ugly, a through-and-through shot, large exit wound. "Looks like a .45, Simmons noted, probing the area. "Missed the femoral artery by an inch. Lucky bastard. Ross, start a large bore IV. Celine, wide open." Jenna fumbled with the catheter. She dropped the alcohol swab. "For Christ's sake," Simmons snapped. "Cooper, you do it. Ross, go update the intake logs. Get out of the way before you kill him." Jenna nodded, murmuring an apology, and backed away. She retreated to the edge of the trauma bay, fading into the background. It was where she did her best work. From her vantage point, she watched the patient, Anthony Russell, she suspected, based on the Bolo alert she had intercepted on an encrypted channel 3 hours ago, stare at the ER doors. He wasn't looking at the doctors, he was watching the choke point. Jenna's gaze drifted to the main entrance. The security guard, Paul Edwards, was a retired cop with bad knees and a penchant for crossword puzzles. He was currently asleep, with his eyes open, near the metal detector. She felt the vibration before she heard the sound. A heavy vehicle, moving fast, braking hard outside. Threat assessment initiates. Jenna reached into her pocket, her fingers grazing the distinct, cold polymer of a tactical pen. It wasn't much, but in the sterile, weapon-free zone of an ER, it was a force multiplier. "He's crashing!" Lauren shouted. "BP dropping. 80/50. "Fluids!" Simmons yelled. "Where is that O-neg?" The chaos in the trauma bay spiked. Perfect timing. The noise would mask the approach. Jenna took a step back, positioning herself near the supply cart. Her posture remained slumped, her expression terrified, but her muscles coiled. The fascia tightened across her back. Her breathing shifted from the shallow panic of a rookie to the deep, rhythmic, diaphragmatic control of a sniper. The automatic doors at the main entrance didn't just open. They were forced. The sound of the magnetic locks failing was a sharp crack, like a dry branch snapping under a boot. Paul Edwards, the security guard, stood up, blinking sluggishly. "Hey, you can't park." The sentence died in his throat. A giant stepped through the sliding glass. He was massive. Robert Hughes, 6'7", 280 pounds of anabolic muscle and bad intent. He wore a heavy canvas jacket despite the heat, and his eyes were pinned, myotic pupils suggesting opiates, or perhaps a stimulant cocktail to numb the pain of what he was about to do. He didn't speak. He moved with the momentum of a freight train. Paul Edwards reached for his belt, for the pepper spray that was his only defense. Hughes didn't break stride. He extended one massive arm, a piston of flesh and bone, and backhanded the guard. The sound was wet and heavy. Edwards left his feet, flying backward 3 meters to crash into a rack of wheelchairs. He didn't move. Silence vacuumed the air out of the waiting room. Then, the screaming started. "Quiet!" Hughes bellowed. His voice was a tectonic grind, deep and vibrating in the chest. He scanned the room, ignoring the civilians cowering under plastic chairs. His eyes locked on the trauma bay curtains. He smelled the blood. Inside Trauma Bay 2, Dr. Simmons froze. The scalpel in his hand wavered. What the hell is going on out there? Lauren Cooper looked at the curtain, her face draining of color. "Paul? Paul!" Jenna didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She watched the curtain. She saw the shadow of the giant growing larger, eclipsing the light. Target: male. Height: 200 centimeters approximate. Weight: 130 kilograms. Posture: aggressive forward lean. Threat level: imminent lethal. Hughes ripped the curtain aside. The metal rings shrieked against the rod, flying off like shrapnel. He filled the space. The air in the trauma bay seemed to thicken, smelling of stale tobacco and ozone. He looked at Anthony Russell on the bed. Russell whimpered, trying to scramble backward, tearing his IV line. Blood sprayed across the floor. "Found you," Hughes grunted. He reached into his jacket. "Sir, you cannot be in here," Dr. Simmons shouted, his voice cracking. It was a brave, stupid instinct. He stepped between the giant and the patient, holding up a hand. This is a sterile area." Hughes looked at the doctor like one might look at an annoying insect. He didn't pull a weapon. He didn't need to. He grabbed Simmons by the throat. It happened fast, but to Jenna, the world slowed down. Tachypsychia, the perception of time dilation caused by an adrenaline dump. She saw Hughes's fingers depress into Simmons's carotid triangle. She saw the doctor's eyes bulge, the capillaries bursting. She saw Lauren screaming, her hands covering her mouth, paralyzed by the violence. Hughes lifted Simmons, a grown man of 180 pounds, off the ground with one hand and tossed him. Simmons flew across the bay, smashing into the crash cart, sending defibrillator pads and adrenaline ampules scattering across the tiles. "Anyone else?" Hughes roared. He turned back to the patient. He reached into his waistband and produced a jagged, rusted piece of rebar, sharpened to a point. A shiv. Crude. Brutal. Effective. Russell was trapped. He had nowhere to go. Jenna looked at the distance. 4 meters. Obstacles. Gurney. Mayo stand. Surface. Slick with blood and saline. Enemy status. Focused on target. Flank exposed. She looked at Lauren. "Run," Jenna whispered. Lauren didn't move. She was catatonic. Hughes raised the rebar. He wasn't going to capture Russell. He was going to execute him. Right here. In the bright lights of the ER, Jenna took a breath. The shy girl died. The stutter evaporated. The slump in her spine corrected itself into a lethal vertical alignment. She didn't look for a weapon. She was the weapon. "Hey, big guy," Jenna said. Her voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was cold, hard, and devoid of fear. It cut through the panic like a scalpel. Hughes paused. He turned his massive head, confused by the tone. He looked at the small nurse in the oversized scrubs, the one with the glasses and the trembling hands. "You dropped something," she said. Hughes blinked. "What?" Jenna moved. Acceleration is a function of force divided by mass. Jenna Ross weighed 125 pounds. Robert Hughes weighed nearly 300. In a contest of strength, she loses. Physics is absolute. But combat isn't just physics. It's geometry. It's anatomy. Jenna crossed the 4 meters in 2 strides. She didn't run. She flowed, keeping her center of gravity low. Hughes reacted, but he was reacting to the shy nurse. He expected a flinch, maybe a hysterical slap. He swung the rebar in a lazy backhand arc, intended to swat her away like a fly. Vector analysis. Incoming high right. Speed, moderate. Opening. Axillary nerve. Exposed. Jenna didn't block. Blocking a limb that size results in a fracture. She ducked under the arc, the rusted metal singing the air inches above her head. She stepped inside his guard. The red zone. She drove her left elbow upward, not into his face, but into the bundle of nerves in his armpit, the brachial plexus. Impact. Hughes grunted, his arm going numb. The rebar didn't drop, but his grip faltered. Jenna didn't stop. Momentum was her oxygen. She spun, using the torque of her hips to drive her heel into the side of his knee, the lateral collateral ligament. Snap. The sound was distinct, like a dry branch breaking. Hughes roared, his leg buckling inward. Physics took over. The structural integrity of the pillar failed. He collapsed to one knee, bringing his head down to her level. "You bitch!" Hughes screamed, swinging his good arm. Jenna caught the wrist. She didn't try to hold it. She used his momentum, guiding the punch past her ear while simultaneously driving the ridge of her hand into his throat. Target, trachea. Force, 60%. Intent, incapacitate, not terminate. Hughes gagged. The air supply cut off. His eyes bulged, the pupils blowing wide with panic. The predator had become the prey in less than 3 seconds. Jenna moved behind him. She wrapped her arm around his thick neck, a rear naked choke, but his neck was too thick, the muscle too dense for a standard blood choke to work quickly. Change tactics. She released the neck, grabbed his hair, and slammed his face into the metal rail of the gurney. Clang. Bone met steel. The giant went limp. He crashed to the floor, a heap of canvas and muscle. The rebar skittered across the floor, spinning to a halt at Lauren's feet. The room was silent. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of Anthony Russell's heart monitor, which had spiked to 160 beats per minute. Dr. Simmons groaned from the pile of medical supplies, clutching his bruised throat. He looked up, his eyes wide, trying to reconcile the image of his clumsy, terrified resident with the woman standing over the unconscious giant. Jenna stood perfectly still. Her chest wasn't heaving. She wasn't shaking. She reached up and adjusted her glasses, which had slid down her nose during the exertion. She looked at the patient. "BP is stabilizing," she said, her voice flat, clinical. "Check the IV line. I might have dislodged it during the engagement." Lauren Cooper stared at her, mouth agape. "Jenna." "What?" "Who are you?" Jenna ignored the question. She stepped over Hughes's massive body and placed 2 fingers on his carotid artery. "Subject is unconscious. Airway is patent. He'll have a severe concussion and a torn LVL. Someone needs to restrain him before he wakes up. Use the leather straps, not the soft restraints. He'll snap the soft ones." "Did you just take him down?" Simmons wheezed, pulling himself up. He's a monster." "Leverage, doctor," Jenna said, turning to check the telemetry monitor. Just simple leverage. But her mind was already moving to the next phase. Tactical analysis. Initial threat neutralized. Method of entry. Frontal assault. Conclusion. Distraction. A man like Hughes doesn't work alone. He was the battering ram. The sledgehammer used to crack the nut, but the scalpel was still out there. Jenna looked at the shattered glass of the ER entrance. The night outside was dark. Too quiet. "Get away from the windows," Jenna commanded. The tone of command was absolute. It wasn't a suggestion. "What?" Lauren asked. "Move!" Jenna barked. She grabbed Lauren by the scrubs and yanked her down behind the nurse's station, just as the first suppressed round shattered the glass of the trauma bay. Fut, fut, fut. 3 rounds, tight grouping, right where Lauren's head had been a second ago. Jenna pressed her back against the cool laminate of the counter. The shy nurse mask was gone completely now. She pulled the tactical pen from her pocket and unscrewed the cap, revealing a carbide glassbreaker tip. "Who are they?" Anthony Russell shouted from the bed, trying to drag himself off the mattress. "They're here to finish it." Jenna looked at the terrified staff. "Stay down," she said. "Code black. Lock the doors. Nobody comes in. Nobody goes out." She crawled toward the crash cart Simmons had knocked over. She didn't reach for the bandages. She reached for the scalpel Simmons had dropped. Blade number 10, carbon steel, weapon acquired. "Dr. Simmons," Jenna said, her voice calm amidst the panic. "Call the police. Tell them we have an active shooter. Multiple bogies." I, Simmons stammered. "Do it!" Jenna peered around the edge of the station. Shadows were moving in the ambulance bay. Professional movement. Bounding overwatch. This wasn't a gang hit. This was a cleanup crew. Jenna Ross, the girl who cried over spilled blood, tightened her grip on the scalpel. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Let's dance." The silence following the initial gunfire was heavier than the noise itself. It was a suffocating, pressurized silence that pressed against the eardrums. Outside the shattered sliding doors of St. Jude's emergency room, the humidity of the night mixed with the acrid scent of propellant. Jenna Ross didn't freeze. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She was already moving, her sneakers squeaking softly on the blood-slicked tiles as she grabbed the back of Anthony Russell's gurney. "We need to move. Now!" she hissed, unlocking the wheels with a sharp kick. "Where?" Lauren Cooper stammered, still crouched behind the nurse's station, clutching a stapler as if it were a talisman against bullets. "Radiology," Jenna commanded. "Thick walls, lead lining, limited entry points. Go." Dr. Simmons was hyperventilating, staring at the shattered glass. Jenna grabbed his scrub top, bunching the fabric in her fist. "Doctor, if you stay here, you are a distinct silhouette in a lit room. You are a target. Move your ass to radiology or die here. Your choice." Simmons blinked, the reality of death overriding his shock. He scrambled up, grabbing Lauren's arm, and they bolted toward the rear corridor. Jenna pushed the gurney. Russell groaned, clutching his leg. "They're professionals," he rasped. "The Echo team. They don't leave witnesses." "Neither do I," Jenna muttered. She shoved the gurney into the dark hallway and paused at the junction box on the wall. She didn't hesitate. She opened the panel and found the main breaker for the ER lighting grid. Tactical advantage. Visual impairment. Enemy likely has night vision devices. NVDs. I know the terrain. They don't. She yanked the lever. The ER plunged into darkness, save for the eerie green glow of the exit signs and the red blinking LEDs of the life support machines. Outside, the second wave breached. They moved like oil, fluid, silent, and black. 3 operators. Tactical gear, no insignias. Suppressed carbines, short barrels for close quarters battle, CQB. Leading them was Brittany Wood. She wasn't a giant like Hughes. She was compact, efficient, a viper in human skin. She stepped over the unconscious body of Hughes without a glance. Failure was not a metric she tolerated. "Check your corners," Brittany whispered into her comms. Her voice was flat, modulated by the throat mic. "Hughes is down. Target is mobile. The lights are cut. They're digging in." "Thermal?" Mark asked. Mark, the point man, sweeping his muzzle left to right. "Negative. Ambient temp is too high inside. The HVAC is down. Switch to white phosphor." Brittany scanned the room. She saw the blood trail. She saw the shattered medical cart. "They went to the back," she signaled. "Stack up. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. Watch for the girl." "The nurse?" Mark scoffed. "The one who dropped a 300-pound Samoan in under 5 seconds," Brittany corrected. "That's not a nurse. That's a sleeper. Weapons free. Anything that moves, put it down." Jenna, watching from the shadows of the corridor 40 meters away, analyzed the entry. Count 3. Gear, level 4 plates, ballistic helmets, suppressed MK-18S. Formation, rolling T, discipline, high. She checked her assets. 1 tactical pen, 1 scalpel, number 10 blade. 1 unconscious giant's layout, useless now. 1 terrified doctor, 1 nurse, 1 bleeding witness. She needed to change the math. "Lauren," Jenna whispered in the darkness of the radiology hallway, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Take Russell into the MRI control room. Lock the door. Do not open it unless you hear my voice. Not the police. Not God himself. Me." "Where are you going?" Lauren whimpered. Jenna turned back toward the ER. She adjusted her glasses. "I have to go do rounds." The hospital pharmacy was a maze of tall shelving units, a library of chemical intervention. It was dark, silent, and smelled of antiseptic and cardboard. Jenna crouched atop a shelving unit in aisle 4, sedatives and paralytics. She was perfectly still, her breathing shallow and controlled. She had shed the white nurse's shoes, too squeaky, and was barefoot. Silent running. She heard the footsteps, soft rubber soles on linoleum, one hostile. detached from the main element to sweep the perimeter. A standard tactical mistake, splitting the force in an unsecured structure. Target: single male. Mark: distance: 5 meters closing. Vector: south entrance. Awareness: alert but scanning horizontal plane, not vertical. Mark moved down the aisle, his weapon light cutting a white cone through the darkness. He swept the beam over the shelves of diazepam and fentanyl. "Clear right," he whispered. He passed directly beneath her. Jenna dropped. She didn't land on him. That would make noise. She landed behind him, cat-like, absorbing the impact with her knees. Before he could turn, she was on him. This wasn't a bar fight. This was anatomical dismantling. She kicked the back of his knee, forcing him to buckle. As his head snapped back, she didn't go for a choke. Too much struggle, too much noise. She jammed a syringe she'd prepped moments ago into the exposed gap between his helmet and his tactical vest. Trapezius muscle. Payload: 100 milligrams succinylcholine. Effect: total muscular paralysis in 45 seconds. Diaphragm failure in 60. Mark gasped, reaching for his neck. He tried to shout, but his vocal cords were already freezing. He tried to raise his rifle, but his arms felt like lead. Jenna guided him to the floor gently, like a lover. She looked into his terrified eyes as the drug took hold. "Shh," she whispered, her voice terrifyingly gentle. "Just breathe. Oh wait, you can't." She stripped him of his comms earpiece and placed it in her own ear. "Mark, report," Brittany's voice crackled. "Status?" Jenna looked at the paralyzed man. He was suffocating, fully conscious, but unable to move a muscle. It was a cruel way to go. Effective. She tapped the mic twice. Click, click. The universal sign for all clear or holding. "Copy," Brittany said. "Move to the extraction point." Jenna stood up. She took the man's sidearm, a Glock 19 with a threaded barrel. She checked the chamber. Brass check. Good. She looked at her reflection in the glass cabinet of the narcotics locker. Blood spatter on her cheek, glasses slightly askew. "I really hate the night shift," she muttered. She moved back into the ceiling plenum, lifting a tile and sliding into the crawl space. The vents were tight, dusty, and loud if you didn't know how to distribute your weight. Jenna knew. She slithered over the ER, tracking the remaining heat signatures below. Brittany Wood and the third operator, a heavy-set man named Paul, not the security guard, were moving toward radiology. They were cautious. They sensed something was wrong. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was predatory. Jenna reached the vent above the MRI suite entrance. She looked down through the grate. Brittany was signaling Paul to breach the door. They were setting a strip charge on the lock. Threat: breach imminent. Asset: Lauren and Russell inside. Solution: environmental hazard. Jenna remembered the MRI. The magnet was always on. A 3 Tesla superconducting magnet. It was strong enough to rip an oxygen tank across the room at lethal speeds. And these men were wearing steel plate body armor. They were carrying rifles with steel barrels. "Hey!" Jenna shouted from the vent. Brittany and Paul spun upward, rifles raising. Jenna didn't shoot them. She shot the fire suppression sprinkler head directly above the MRI suite door. Bang! The glass bulb shattered. High-pressure water erupted, drenching the hallway, drenching Brittany and Paul. "Contact top!" Brittany yelled, firing blindly into the ceiling. "Now!" Jenna screamed, though nobody but her knew the plan. She dropped a flashbang grenade she had taken from Mark's vest through the vent grate. Flash. Bang. The concussion was deafening in the confined hallway. Brittany and Paul staggered, blinded and deafened. Jenna kicked the grate out and dropped to the floor behind them. "Door!" Jenna yelled at the locked radiology room. "Open the door!" Lauren, terrified but obedient, cracked the door open. The invisible magnetic field of the MRI machine, no longer shielded by the copper-lined door, reached out into the hallway like a starving god. The physics of a 3 Tesla magnet are unforgiving. It pulls ferromagnetic objects with a force that increases exponentially as the distance decreases. Brittany Wood felt it first. Her rifle, a finely tuned instrument of death, suddenly became a living thing in her hands. It jerked violently toward the open door of the MRI room. "Weapon!" she screamed, fighting the pull. Paul wasn't fast enough. He was closer to the door. The magnetic field grabbed his rifle, dragging him with it. He was wearing a plate carrier with steel plates, level 4 armor designed to stop armor-piercing bullets. Now, it was an anchor. "Help!" Paul shrieked as he was lifted off his feet. He flew backward, through the open door, airborne. Crash! He slammed into the bore of the MRI machine with the force of a car crash. The rifle pinned him against the donut-shaped housing, crushing his chest. The steel plates in his vest clamped him to the machine. He was pinned, helpless, wheezing as the weight crushed his ribs. Brittany Wood, smarter and faster, released her rifle immediately. It flew out of her hands and clattered against the machine inside the room. But her sidearm, her knife, even the steel eyelets on her boots, everything was pulling her toward the room. She dropped to the floor, clawing at the wet tiles, resisting with the drag. Jenna stood in the hallway. She had stripped off her belt and anything metal before dropping from the vent. She held the polymer Glock, plastic frame, minimal steel. She felt the tug, but it was manageable. "Close the door," Jenna shouted to Lauren. Lauren slammed the heavy copper-lined door shut. The magnetic field was cut off instantly. Silence returned, save for the muffled screaming of Paul, trapped inside the room with the machine. Brittany Wood lay on the wet floor, gasping for air. She was disarmed. Her primary weapon was gone. Her backup was gone. She rolled onto her back, looking up. Jenna Ross stood over her. The rookie nurse looked down, water dripping from her hair, the stolen Glock aimed steadily at Brittany's center of mass. "You have a really bad bedside manner," Jenna said. Brittany laughed. It was a jagged, bloody sound. "You think this is over? You think one sleeper cell in a scrub top stops this?" "I think you're unarmed and on the ground," Jenna countered. "Target neutralized." Brittany smiled, reaching for a pouch on her ankle. Ceramic knife, non-magnetic. "I'm never unarmed." Brittany Kippup. It was a move that defied gravity, launching her from her back to her feet in a blur of motion. She lunged, the ceramic blade flashing toward Jenna's throat. Jenna didn't shoot. At this range, a gun is a liability. It can be grabbed, redirected. Jenna parried the knife hand with her left forearm, accepting the shallow cut to deflect the fatal blow. She stepped in, hip to hip, close quarters, range, contact, threat, bladed weapon, counter, disarm and disable. Jenna wrapped her right arm, still holding the gun, around Brittany's neck, trapping the knife arm with her own body. She drove her knee into Brittany's stomach, once, twice. Brittany wheezed but didn't drop. She headbutted Jenna hard. Jenna's glasses flew off. Her nose crunched. Blood blinded her for a microsecond. Jenna stumbled back. Brittany slashed again, opening a gash on Jenna's shoulder. "You're rusty," Brittany sneered, advancing. "Spent too much time changing bedpans." Jenna wiped the blood from her eyes. She didn't look afraid. She looked annoyed. "I was trying to be nice," Jenna said. "I promised myself I wouldn't kill anyone in front of the patients." "Break your promise," Brittany taunted. Jenna dropped the magazine from the Glock. She racked the slide, ejecting the chambered round. She tossed the empty gun aside. "Okay." Jenna assumed a stance that wasn't taught in any dojo. It was a stance born in black site interrogation rooms and deep cover operations. Krav Maga mixed with dirty street fighting. Brittany lunged. Jenna stepped into the blade. She caught Brittany's wrist with both hands, twisting it outward, violating the joint's natural range of motion. Crack! Brittany screamed as her wrist shattered. The knife clattered to the floor. Jenna didn't stop. She spun Brittany around, kicked the back of her knee to drop her, and then wrapped her legs around Brittany's torso in a body triangle, a constrictor hold. She locked her arm under Brittany's chin. "Who sent you?" Jenna whispered into Brittany's ear as she applied pressure. "Go to hell," Brittany choked out. "I've been there. The rent is cheap." Jenna tightened the grip. "The Ghost Protocol. Is that it? Are they active?" Brittany's eyes went wide. The oxygen was fading. "How do you know?" "Sleep," Jenna said. She squeezed. 5 seconds later, Brittany Wood went limp. Jenna held the choke for 3 extra seconds, ensuring deep unconsciousness, then released her. She sat on the wet floor of the hallway, surrounded by the wreckage of her hospital. She was bleeding from her forehead and shoulder. Her scrubs were ruined. The door to the MRI room opened slowly. Lauren peeked out, eyes wide. Is it over?" Jenna stood up, wincing. She picked up her glasses, miraculously unbroken, and put them back on. She looked at the unconscious assassin at her feet. "No," Jenna said, her voice heavy with a past she had tried to bury. "They know I'm here now. This was just the probe." She looked at Anthony Russell, who was limping out of the room supported by Dr. Simmons. "You," Jenna pointed a bloody finger at the patient. "You have exactly 5 minutes to tell me why a Tier 1 hit squad is trying to turn my ER into a morgue. Before I finish what they started." Russell swallowed hard, looking at the small, blood-soaked nurse who had just dismantled an elite kill team. "It's not about me," Russell whispered. "It's about the data I'm carrying. It's about you, Jenna. They didn't just come for me. They came to flush you out." Jenna froze. Target analysis. Update. Primary target. Me. The phone at the nurse's station down the hall began to ring. A shrill, piercing sound in the dead silence. Jenna walked over to it. She picked up the receiver. "St. Jude's Emergency," she said, her voice reverting to a hint of the shy girl, though the steel was visible underneath. "Hello, 626. A digitized voice said on the other end. "It's been a long time. We want our asset back." Jenna's hand tightened on the phone until the plastic creaked. "Come and get her," Jenna said. She slammed the phone down. The phone receiver hung by its coiled cord, swaying gently back and forth like a pendulum counting down the seconds to impact. "Come and get her." The words hung in the stale, chemically scented air of the emergency room, heavier than the suffocating silence that followed. Jenna Ross turned to Anthony Russell. Her eyes, once soft, doe-like, and hidden behind thick, smudged lenses, were now shards of flint, hard, sharp, and capable of sparking a fire. She didn't ask. She interrogated. Her voice had dropped an octave, stripping away the rural accent she had carefully cultivated for 3 years. "Who is he?" Russell slumped against the tiled wall, clutching his bandaged leg. The blood had soaked through the gauze, blooming like a dark rose. "Conrad, the handler. He ran the Ghost Protocol program back in the 90s. Black budget, off the books. They scrubbed it 6 years ago, or so we thought." He coughed, wincing. "I found the budget allocation hidden in a black ops slush fund, masked as foreign aid. That's why I ran. That's why they want me." He looked up at her, realizing the terrifying truth staring back at him. "But the files, they referenced a rogue asset, a myth, Agent 626, the only one who ever successfully walked away without a body bag." Jenna didn't blink. Her face was a mask of ceramic neutrality. Nobody walks away, Russell. We just stop running. Tactical assessment. Siege verified. Perimeter compromised. Hostiles inbound via vertical insertion, roof, and ground level, basement. Pincer movement initiated. Current location, indefensible. She spun on her heel. "Lauren, Dr. Simmons!" Jenna's voice was a whip crack, cutting through their paralysis. "Get to the morgue, basement level 2, now." "The morgue?" Simmons squeaked, his face ashen. "You want us to hide with the dead?" "The dead don't bleed, Doctor. You do!" Jenna snapped. "The morgue has reinforced steel doors, concrete walls 2 feet thick, and an independent ventilation system. If they deploy gas, it's the only place you won't choke. Go!" She shoved them toward the service elevator, watching until the doors slid shut. Once she was alone, the transformation was complete. Jenna moved to the unconscious body of Mark, the operator she had paralyzed in the pharmacy. She stripped the plate carrier off him. It was heavy. Level 4 ceramic plates designed to stop armor-piercing rounds. It was too big for her slight frame, smelling of stale sweat and gun oil. She pulled the Velcro straps until they dug into her ribs, securing the armor tight against her chest. She checked the Glock 19 she had taken from him. 12 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. 13 bullets against a paramilitary hit squad. Variable, ammunition shortage. Solution, force multipliers. She needed an equalizer. Something loud, something nasty. Jenna sprinted to the trauma bay supply closet, her mind working like a schematics engine. She grabbed 3 oxygen tanks, the small green portable E-cylinders. She grabbed a roll of heavy-duty surgical tape and a box of road flares from the emergency crash kit. Improvised explosive device, IED, construction. Component A, compressed oxygen, accelerant/pressure. Component B, magnesium flare, igniter, burns at 1,600 degrees Celsius. Component C, shrapnel. She taped a handful of stainless steel scalpels, hemostats, and loose trauma shears to the side of the first tank. It was crude. It was unstable. It was a poor man's claymore. A low, thrumming vibration shook the ceiling tiles. Dust drifted down in the beams of the emergency lights. Sound signature, rotor wash, heavy transport helicopter, UH-60, Black Hawk or similar. Roof insertion. "They're coming from the top," Jenna whispered to the empty room. She ran to the main elevator bank. She jammed the doors of the left elevator open with a heavy crash cart, immobilizing it on the ground floor. She placed the first oxygen tank inside the cab. She rigged the road flare to the valve, running a length of suture thread from the striker of the flare across the elevator opening. A simple tripwire. If anyone tried to rappel down the shaft and landed in this car, or if the car was called and moved, the thread would pull. The flare would strike. The oxygen tank would become a bomb. Then she ran to the stairwell. She heard them before she saw them. Heavy boots on concrete, descending rapidly from the roof access. 6 floors up. The rhythmic, disciplined thud of a stack, moving in unison. Target count, 6+. Gear, heavy assault, night vision capabilities. Rules of engagement, scorched earth, no witnesses. Jenna didn't climb up to meet them. That was suicide. She waited. She positioned herself on the landing of the 3rd floor, pressing her back into the shadows of the corner. She looked up through the narrow gap in the railings. The fatal funnel. A beam of infrared light, invisible to the naked eye but faintly perceptible as a distortion in the dust, sliced through the darkness above. "Flash out!" a voice shouted from the 5th floor. A canister dropped, clanging against the metal railing as it fell. Jenna turned away instantly, squeezing her eyes shut and clapping her hands over her ears, opening her mouth to equalize the pressure. Bang! The stun grenade detonated on the 4th floor. Even with her precautions, the sound was a physical blow, a hammer to the chest. The scream of tinnitus filled the stairwell, a high-pitched whine that drowned out all other sound. But Jenna moved. She spun back into the gap, raising the Glock. She didn't fire at the men. They were too high up, protected by the angle of the stairs. She fired at the industrial fire extinguisher, mounted on the wall of the fourth-floor landing, directly next to where the lead operator's boots were visible. The 9mm round punctured the pressurized cylinder. It exploded in a massive cloud of white monoammonium phosphate powder. The pressure released with a deafening hiss, filling the fourth-floor landing with an opaque, choking fog. "Contact! Can't see! Visuals obscured!" the lead operator shouted, his voice distorted by a gas mask. The white powder coated their night vision goggles, rendering their expensive tech useless. Jenna fired 3 more shots blindly into the cloud, not to kill, but to suppress, to force them to pause, to make them respect the darkness. Ping, ping, thud. Bullets sparked off the metal railing and dug into the concrete near the operator's feet. The squad halted, confused by the aggression. Jenna lowered the weapon, her chest heaving, the adrenaline turning her blood into high-octane fuel. "Welcome to my hospital," she muttered, her lips curling into a humorless smile. Visiting hours are over. The stairwell was a choke point, but Jenna knew she couldn't hold it forever. They would flank her. They would rappel down the elevator shaft. She retreated to the second floor, the maternity ward. It was empty due to renovations. Plastic sheeting hung from the ceiling like ghostly shrouds. Construction tools were scattered everywhere. Jenna moved through the plastic sheets, a phantom in the haze. She heard the team breach the stairwell door. "Spread out, sweep and clear, watch for traps." The voice was cold, synthetic. Conrad. He was here personally. Jenna crouched behind a stack of drywall. She watched the shadows play on the plastic sheeting. Target: Conrad. Distance: 15 meters. Threat: Alpha. Armor: heavy. She couldn't take him head-on. She needed to separate the pack. She picked up a heavy nail gun left by the contractors. Pneumatic. It was connected to a compressor hose. She triggered the compressor. The motor roared to life, a deafening mechanical growl in the silent ward. "Contact left! Noise source!" 3 operators swung toward the compressor. Jenna was already moving right. She flanked them through the nursery. She came up behind the trail man, a bulky operator scanning the ceiling. She didn't use the gun. She used a defibrillator she had dragged from the crash cart. Charge: 360 joules. Application: direct contact. Result: cardiac arrest. "Clear," Jenna whispered. She jammed the paddles against the exposed base of the operator's neck, just above the vest line. She hit the discharge button. The man convulsed violently, his muscles seizing in a tetanic contraction. He dropped without a sound, his heart rhythm scrambled into chaos. "Man down! Medic! No medics!" Conrad roared. "She's baiting you! Push forward!" They opened fire. Bullets shredded the drywall, punching through the plastic sheeting. The air filled with gypsum dust and debris. Jenna rolled, keeping low. She scrambled toward the neonatal unit. She was cornered. 3 operators pushing from the front, Conrad closing from the flank. Situation: critical. Ammunition: 4 rounds. Exit: blocked. She saw the medical gas lines running along the wall. Oxygen. Nitrous oxide. Jenna raised the Glock. She took a breath, slowing her heart rate. Target: valve regulator. Distance: 8 meters. She fired. The bullet severed the main valve of the nitrous oxide line. High-pressure gas hissed out, filling the confined corridor with a sweet, sickening fog. Gas. "Mask up," Conrad commanded, but the gas was displacing the oxygen, and it was highly flammable if the concentration was right. Jenna retreated to the far door. She pulled the second road flare from her pocket. She struck it. The red magnesium flame sputtered to life. casting demonic shadows against the plastic sheets. "Hey, Conrad!" she shouted. The shadow of the commander stopped. 626. You look tired." "I'm just warming up." She tossed the flare into the gas-filled corridor and kicked the door shut. Boom. The explosion wasn't a detonteon, it was a deflagration. A massive fireball consumed the oxygen and nitrous mix, blowing the corridor walls outward. The concussive wave slammed Jenna against the far wall, knocking the wind out of her. Inside the kill box, men screamed. Jenna stumbled to her feet, ears ringing, vision swimming. She checked her weapon. Slide locked back. Empty. She dropped the gun. She stumbled toward the exit, toward the lobby. She had to make sure they didn't get to the basement. But as she reached the atrium, a figure emerged from the smoke. Conrad. He was singed, his tactical vest scorched, his face bleeding from shrapnel cuts. But he was standing, and he was holding a combat knife. "Out of tricks, little girl," he rasped. Jenna straightened her spine. She adjusted her glasses, one lens now cracked. She raised her fists. "I don't need tricks," she said. The atrium of St. Jude's was a cathedral of glass and steel, bathed in the moonlight streaming through the skylight. It was a fitting arena. Conrad was a master of Systema and Sambo. He moved with a fluid, terrifying grace for a man of his age. He flipped the knife into a reverse grip. "I made you," Conrad said, circling. "I took a frightened runaway and turned her into a weapon. And this is how you repay me?" "You didn't make me," Jenna said, circling opposite him. "You broke me. I had to put the pieces back together myself." Conrad lunged. It was a feint. He slashed low, aiming for the femoral artery. Jenna checked the kick, taking the blade on the sole of her sneaker. She countered with a jab to the eyes, but Conrad swayed back, catching her wrist. He twisted, throwing her over his hip. Jenna hit the polished floor hard. She rolled instantly, avoiding the downward stab that cracked the tile where her head had been a microsecond before. She sprang up. Analysis. Opponent superior strength, superior reach, injury status moderate, fatigue high. She couldn't win a grapple. She had to end it with precision. Conrad slashed again, a horizontal arc. Jenna ducked, but not fast enough. The tip of the blade sliced her cheek, opening a gash from cheekbone to jaw. Pain was information. She filed it away. She backed up, retreating toward the reception desk. "Nowhere to run, 626. Conrad grinned. Jenna grabbed a heavy glass vase from the desk. Flowers for a patient who would never receive them. She hurled it. Conrad swatted it aside effortlessly. "Desperate." "Distraction," Jenna corrected. While his hand was swatting the vase, Jenna launched herself. Not at him, but at the wall behind him. She ran 2 steps up the vertical surface, a parkour wall run, and backflipped over his head. It was a move of impossible athleticism. As she inverted in the air, she grabbed his head. Gravity and momentum did the rest. She slammed him face first into the granite reception counter. Crunch! Conrad roared, flailing backward, blood pouring from a broken nose. He slashed blindly behind him, catching Jenna in the ribs. She grunted, falling back. The wound was deep. She felt the warmth spreading over her side. Conrad turned, staggering. He raised the knife for the killing blow. "Die," he whispered. Jenna looked at him. She didn't look at the knife. She looked at the pen holder on the desk, a simple, plastic ballpoint pen. "Improvised weapon," she whispered. As Conrad brought the knife down, Jenna stepped inside his guard. She blocked his knife hand with her left arm, sacrificing the limb, and drove the pen with her right hand. She didn't aim for the eye. She aimed for the sub-mental triangle, under the chin, upward, into the brain stem. Force, maximum. Trajectory, vertical. She drove the plastic through the soft tissue. Conrad froze. The knife dropped from his hand. His eyes went wide, devoid of comprehension. The signal from his brain to his body was severed instantly. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Jenna stood over him, panting, bleeding from 3 major wounds. She swayed. "Code Black," she whispered to the empty room. "Clear." Sirens wailed in the distance. Real sirens this time. Blue and red lights flashed against the glass walls. Jenna looked at the carnage, the bodies, the destruction. She couldn't be here when they arrived. Questions she couldn't answer, a life she couldn't explain. She limped to the basement access. She made her way to the morgue. She banged on the steel door. "Simmons, it's clear!" She heard the locks disengage. The door creaked open. Simmons and Lauren stood there, pale and shaking. "Jenna!" Lauren gasped, seeing the blood. "Oh my God, you need surgery." "I'll be fine," Jenna said, leaning against the doorframe. She handed Lauren the encrypted hard drive she had taken from Russell's pocket earlier. "Give this to the feds. Tell them a ghost gave it to you." "Where are you going?" Simmons asked. "Shift's over, Doctor." Jenna managed a weak smile. "I'm clocking out." She turned and walked into the shadows of the service tunnel that led to the sewers. By the time the SWAT team breached the lobby, the only trace of Jenna Ross was a pair of broken glasses left on the reception desk, next to the body of the man who tried to own her. The silent guardian had vanished. We often walk through life, assuming that strength wears a uniform, that courage is loud, and that heroes look like the statues we build of them. But true power is rarely visible. It hides in the quiet moments, in the trembling hands of the fearful who choose to act anyway. Jenna Ross reminds us that we are not defined by the masks we wear to survive, but by what we are willing to sacrifice when the darkness comes for the innocent. We all have a sleeper inside us, a reservoir of untapped strength waiting for the right moment to awaken. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please take a moment to enjoy the thrill, share it with a friend who needs an escape, and subscribe for more adrenaline-fueled adventures. The next mission is already being planned, and you won't want to miss the briefing. Stay safe, stay vigilant.